Hello everybody, welcome to linuxhint.com YouTube channel. In today's video, we're gonna show you that what are the 15 most important Java questions that you could be asked in a Java interview. All right, so these are the basic questions. Okay, so just expect that any of these questions could be asked in any of the Java interview. All right. So the pattern of this video, I was thinking about creating this video, how that would be most effective. So I believe the kinesthetic learning is one of the top learning mechanism. So those of you who don't know what the kinesthetic learning is, that is basically you sit with pen and paper and you note down everything that is being said or that is being taught. Okay, so these are the 15 questions. These are in front of you. So take a notepad or something like this, a paper, and take a pen and start writing these questions. And I will explain to you each question in detail and just, note down or write down a few of the answers and you're all good. Okay, so you would be learning with me in one of the top best method in the world, which is kinesthetic learning. All right, so let's go ahead and let's start. So the first question is, what is JDK? So you could be asked that. So the answer to your question is that, first of all, let me just write here. JDK, it basically stands for Java Development Kit. All right, just write that down on your paper as well. So basically, the Java Development Kit is a software development environment used for developing Java applications and applets. All right, it includes the Java runtime environment, which we often refer to as JRE. All right, let me write here, Java runtime environment. Okay, so it includes the Java runtime environment, which is an interpreter, loader of Java, a compiler it also contains, which is like Java C. In your command line, you can check if Java is installed or not by just simply typing Java C and hit enter. If it gives you details, then it means that JDK is installed on your computer. If it doesn't give you anything, it means that JDK is not installed on your computer. Okay, so let me show you quickly. So if we press Ctrl Alt T, we open up our terminal. So if I write here Java C, if I hit enter, you can see all these details, right? So it means that Java is installed on my system. If it would have given us any error, like for example, permission denied or Java C is not recognizable, things like that, then it would have meant that Java is not installed on your system, or JDK specifically is not installed on your system. So it also can have the JRE, it have an archive, which is a jar file. It also have a documentation generator, which is like Java doc, and other tools which are basically needed in Java development. All right, so that's it for JDK. So we would move on to our next question, which is basically, what is Java? All right, so if we talk about Java, Java is a high-level programming language. High-level programming and low-level programming languages are like the languages which are near to human language. They are called like high-level programming languages, which are like readable. So for example, if you read somewhere Java code, it's like near to human language, right? So the computer language is like zeros and ones. The computer language is binary. Okay, so the low-level languages are like which are near to computer language, and that is binary. Okay, which are low-level languages are quite difficult for human to understand. But high-level programming languages are the languages which can easily be read by any human, and they perform different tasks. Okay, so you can just give a command in your words, like different specific commands obviously, and basically your compiler would convert that into from high level language to the binary language, basically to zeros and ones of the computer language, and then it would give the command to a computer to run basically the code or the command that the user or the programmer that have the command that it has given. Okay. So as I have said, Java is a high level programming language. So let me just write here, high level programming language. All right. And it is basically platform independent. All right. It doesn't require any specific platform to run. And basically Java is a collection of objects, okay, different objects. So we would discuss what an object is and how it works in our upcoming questions. Okay, so Java was developed by Sun Microsystems in 1990s. All right, I think it was 1994, but don't quote me on that. I read it somewhere, 1994. So there are a lot of applications in Android, that you're using right now. Maybe if you're an Android user, those applications have been developed in Java. And not only applications, but a lot of different websites are also developed in Java. And not only applications and website, the different games that you play, they are also developed in Java. All right. So let's move on to the next question, which is what is the significance of Java? All right. So the idea is that Java is basically, it follows the OOP concepts. It is an object-oriented programming language. All right. When I say object-oriented, you might have different, if you are familiar with programming, you might have different ideas rushing through your mind, and those ideas are right. So this language, Java, it supports inheritance, it supports encapsulation, it supports polymorphism, and also it supports abstraction. Okay, so in the upcoming questions, we also have these questions: explain inheritance, encapsulation, and polymorphism. So we'll discuss that there. And as far as the abstraction is concerned, it's like making the data private. Like from one class, you make the data private, and from outside the world or from outside somewhere, the other users cannot basically access that data or that variables that you have made private. Okay. So the other significance of Java is like that it is platform independent, which means that a single program that you would write, it would work on different platforms without any modification. Okay, so you don't need to modify your code in order to run it on the second or third or fourth platform. Okay, it would just run fine. You just need to write the code once. All right, so let me just quickly write here: inheritance, polymorphism. All right, abstraction, encapsulation. All right, so things like that. And also it is platform independent, and it is high performance programming language. Okay, so the Java, it is basically, it has just-in-time compiler, which enables high performance in Java. All right. So if you talk about just-in-time compilers, they basically convert the bytecode into machine language, and then basically the JVM starts the execution. Okay, so it makes it faster, and that's why Java is like high performance. So it also supports multi-threading, which is a really crucial part of Java. Okay, so I think I would include exception here as well. Okay, multi-threading and exception. So if you talk about multi-threading, it is like a flow of execution in which you're coming with a flow of different sort of executions. That is basically called a thread. All right. So JVM, basically it creates a thread which is called main thread, and the user can create multiple threads by extending the thread class or the main thread or by implementing the runnable interface. All right. And if you talk about exception is basically that when you're writing a code, you are basically catching different sort of exceptions. So for example, if you take the input from the user as his name, so obviously the name could not contain numbers. All right. So if the user enters any sort of number, this is an exception. Okay. And you want to catch it. So basically when the user enters any number, so you would write an exception in your code, and it would basically catch that exception, and it would return the answer to the user that there is an exception. You have put in the number, which cannot be part of your name, obviously. So please enter only alphabets. Okay. So things like that. This is the concept of exception. So now that is all. I hope that I've explained that in detail. So the next question is that why Java is a high performance language. So the idea is, I think I had just have explained that, but I would explain that again. Java, it basically uses just-in-time compiler or JIT compiler, okay, which means that it is going to convert the instructions into bytecodes right away and quickly. Okay, so I think that is the only reason that Java is a very high performance language. Okay, so that, I think that's it for this question. So now let's move on to the next question, which is like, let me just write here Java in time compiler. Okay, so let's move on to the next question, which is essentially what are some popular Java IDEs? So I know of only 2 popular IDEs. There might be other ones, but I'm not aware of them. So if you're aware of any of the other Java IDEs, then let us know in the comments below. So the very popular one is Eclipse. Okay, the other one is NetBeans. All right, these are like popular ones, and I think there is another one as well on which we have created a video as well. I forgot the name of it, but I would put the link to that video in the description. I would put the link to the JDK installation and all the Java related videos on our channel which are available. I'm gonna put the link in the description to all those videos, and hopefully I would put the link in the description for that specific IDE for Linux as well that we have installed. Okay, I forgot its name. So that's it for this question. Now let's move on to the next question, which is explain inheritance. All right. Okay, let's talk about inheritance. So this topic is very interesting. So make sure that you are all ears. So inheritance in Java, it is basically a mechanism in which one object, it acquires all the properties and behaviors of a parent object. Okay. So it means that you do not need to write the class or object or whatever you are basically copying. You do not need to write all that code again and again. Okay, you just inherit that class, from that class all the attributes and specifications, and you write your code further. So for example, if there is an animal class and you want to write a dog class, so what you would do, there are certain characteristics which are like general and which exist in all animals. Okay, so you won't basically type on all the attributes and characteristics again in the dog class. Rather, what you would do, you would basically inherit the animal class. So all the basic attributes of the animal would basically come in from that animal class for dog class. Okay, so if you, the syntax of that would be like, if you have a class like dog, you would write dog extends animal. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a while. So the idea behind inheritance in Java is that you can create new classes that are built upon existing classes. Okay, so basically when you inherit from an existing class, you can reuse methods and fields of the parent class, which I have explained to you earlier. Like the animal class would be a parent class and the dog class would be the child class. Okay, So you can add basically new methods and fields into your current class also, extending from the previous or the parent class. Okay, so inheritance basically it represents is a relationship. All right, so if you're familiar with Java, you basically know it, right? So there is a has a relationship as well that we would discuss later. So you can say that why we should use inheritance in Java. So the idea is that if you want to use it for method overriding, so runtime polymorphism kind of thing can be achieved. It is good as well. So if you want to reuse the code that you have written once in one class and you want to reuse it in the second class, you can also use inheritance. Okay, so yeah, that's it. The syntax remains. So let me just discuss the syntax here. So for example, let me just go here in our IDE. So for example, this is a hello class. All right, so let's say that I want this class to extend from the super class. So this is basically hello is the subclass. All right, imagine that it is a subclass and we extend it. Right now obviously we do not have that hello world class, so that's why it would give an error, because there is no class as hello world right now. So the basic syntax would be that. Okay, so let's say that hello world has a method called as hello world as well, and in that method it prints out basically hello world. Okay, so we want to use that method, then basically we don't have to write the hello world method again here. Would just simply call that method using this class. All right, because we are extending from that class. All right, so I hope you have got the point. So this extend keyword, it indicates that you're making a new class that derives from an existing class. Okay, so the meaning of extends is to increase the functionality. So now let's do an example and let's see that how inheritance can be achieved. So here we have, this is the Java project. So I would create a new class simply. All right, I would go here and I would name this class as hello world. All right, as I have basically given the name there. I won't create it as a main class. I would just create it as a class. And I think we have a question on classes as well. So I would explain that to you later. What is a class basically? For those of you who are already familiar with Java, you basically know. So obviously if you're watching a Java interview question video, it means that you are familiar with Java, right? So now this is the class and you can see that the error here, it has been gone, right? So what we would do would just write here, let's say string, and here we are going to have the S capital. All right, so it is not bash anymore. So we write here string and then we write here H, let's say, which stands for, let's say, hello. Okay, so we write here hello and we put a semicolon here to end the line basically. So Java is case sensitive, so you need to make sure of these things. Okay, so here we are going to have another string which is going to be W, and that is going to be, let's say, word. All right, so now you basically put a semicolon here as well, and now you are going to have a, let's say, a method here which is like void hello word, or let's call it HW. And in this method what we're going to do is that we are going to have a print statement, system dot out dot print ln, or let me just write here print, which is like with a small p, and here we're gonna have a semicolon, here we're gonna have double quotes. All right, so inside this double quote we write here hello from world. All right, something like this. All right, so that's it for this class. So now what we're gonna do is that we are going to go to hello.java class, and inside of that we are going to use the inheritance. So we have this extends hello world, So it means that we can access the contents of hello world class as well. Okay, we have access to each and every one of these. All right, so now what we would do would basically go inside the inside this one. All right, and inside this class what we're gonna do is that we are going to create an object from that class. Okay, so we'd write here hello world, which is another class, and we would create the object here. So let's say a, or we say obj1, let's say the first object. And what we do, we write here new, and then we write here hello world, and then we have parentheses here. This is just a simple syntax, all right, to create an object. All right, so now what we're gonna do is that we are going to access these two variables and this function, and we're gonna call it inside this main function. Okay, because basically you can say that we are going to inherit them. Okay, so what we're gonna do is that we're gonna have here system.out.println. all right, and inside of that what we're gonna do is that we're gonna have obj1 dot, and we're gonna have h, which is a variable. All right, here you can see. Okay, so obj1.h means that the object is basically helping us access the variable inside the class which is being inherited. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is that we just simply copy this line here, and instead of .h now we write here .w. all right, because w is a variable as well. So now we have these two variables called upon, and now we are going to call the function. So the function name is here hw. So what we would do, we would write here obj1 dot hw, and this is a function. That's how you call it. And now you can see that we do not have anything here. We do not have a variable here that can be printed inside this class. We do not have any function in this class, but all of that we are basically inheriting from this class, which is hello world. So now what we are going to do is that we are going to run this program, and we run it. So when we run it, and you can see that let me just write here println so that the answer is in the next line. Okay, and it is clear, more clear. So we run it again, and here you can see that the result is hello, right? It is this obj1.h. Then we have world, which is this one, obj1.w, and hello from world. This is this one, this function that we have called. Okay, so that's how you basically use inheritance. So I hope you do not have any confusions. If you have any confusions about inheritance, I have kept everything very, very simple. Okay, and I have explained to you the core concepts. So I hope that you have got the point. So now let's move on to the next question, which is essentially explain encapsulation. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the question number 7, which is explain encapsulation. And encapsulation is one of the 4 fundamental OOP concepts. The other 3 are inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction, as we have discussed. So encapsulation in Java is a mechanism of wrapping the data or the variables and code which is acting on the data essentially, and we call them methods. We wrap them together as a single unit. All right. So in encapsulation, the variables of a class will be hidden from other classes and can be accessed only through the methods of their current class. Okay. So therefore, it is also known as data hiding. Okay, so encapsulation is the other name of that is data hiding. Okay, so to achieve encapsulation in Java, all you have to do is that you have to declare the variables of a class as private. This is the one thing. The second thing that you need to do is that you have to provide public setter and getters. That is a very important concept. So setters and getters, they are nothing but they are the simple methods to modify and view the variable values basically. Okay, So I think that is pretty much it as far as the theory is concerned. So let's discuss a few of the encapsulation advantages as well. So the advantage of encapsulation is that the fields of a class can be made read-only or write-only. Okay. Uh, the second advantage that I have in my mind is that a class can have total control over what is stored in its fields. Okay. So let's discuss encapsulation. So just forget about the names of the class right now. Let's say that this is the class in which we would basically use or call the encapsulation, and let's say this is the class which is going to be encapsulated. Okay, so here we have let's say we are going to define the private variables. Okay, so let's say we have here private string h, and we basically do not give anything here as the input. Okay, and then we have here private string w, and we basically do not give any value to that as well. All right, so let's say we have these two variables and we want to basically fill it. Okay, so now what you are going to do, that you're going to have setters and getters. So in the statement where you have the return keyword, it means that is a getter, and in which you do not have any return and you have an equal sign there, it means that is basically a setter. All right, so let's go ahead and let's try to do it. All right, so what we would do, first of all, we'd basically create the getter. Okay, so we'd just basically remove this, and in here let's say we have public, then we have here string, and then we have here h, and what we're going to do is inside of that we are going to return a value. This one is giving us an error right now because we have not returned anything yet. So what we would do, that we would basically name it as, let's say, get h. All right, and here we would basically return h. All right, so that is fairly simple, and the next getter would be like similar. All right, so the next getter would be same. So let me just basically copy it and just write here public string get w, and here let me return w as well. So these are basically two getters. Let me just make it a big window here, and now we are going to set the setters. All right, we have the getters now, and now we are going to set the setters. All right, so now what we would do, we would have here a public sort of thing, public, and then we write here void, because this is not going to return anything. So when it doesn't return anything, it means that you're going to have a void here. Okay, and in here you are going to write string, and let's say, let's call it new h, and here we're going to write h equals new h. Okay, so we write here h equals new h, and this is going to have a body as well, so we just put parenthesis here. All right, so you can see that basically we have parentheses around it, and now we are just going to copy it for the w as well. So this setter is going to be here for w. Okay, so new w, let's call it, and let's call it new w as well, and let's have here w as well. Okay, so now you can see that if you want to differentiate it from that, then you can just also do that new h. You can have that in capital as well, and you can have this w in capital as well, and you can have this w in capital as well. All right, so these are the setters and getters. So now what we would do, that this variable here is private, right? So we can access it only through the methods or the functions, okay? And that's what we are gonna do inside here, okay? So right now, let me just remove all of that. It is giving us errors because the class has been changed. All right, the first thing that we are going to do is that we are going to create the object of that class. All right, so right now, in this case, we do not need to inherit the class. Just an object would be enough because we are in the same project, right? So here, so what we would do, would just write here hello world, and then we'd create the object. Let's call it enc, and then enc stands for basically encapsulation. You can have here anything like a, b, c, or any name of the object. It doesn't really matter, okay? So then you have here new, then you have here hello world. All right, so this is how you basically create an object. So once you create an object, now you are going to use this object enc dot set h, okay? And let's say that you're going to have here hello. All right, and if we talk about the enc dot set w, let's say you are going to have here world. All right, so this is hello dot world. And now if you want to basically print that out, how would you do that? So you would have here the print function, which is essentially system dot out dot print ln. All right, so let me just write here print ln, and in here let's say you're going to say h and then a colon, and then you basically use that method, which is essentially, or use that getter, which is essentially enc dot get h. All right, and after that you use here w, and then what you're going to do is that you are going to have here enc dot get w. All right, so this is the second method you call, and here you can see that it is giving us some sort of error here, and that error is, I think, we do not have to have a second plus here, right? So because that plus was here because we were going to write another thing here, right? So that's why this plus was here. Okay, so that is basically the syntax of Java. So now we go ahead and we try to run it. You can see that these variables were private and they cannot be accessed. Only they can be accessed through functions, and that's what we have done. We have accessed them through functions, and we have created an object. We have set the value using a function or the setter, and then we have get the value or printed out the value using a function, which is a getter essentially. Okay, so we go ahead, we run this, and when we run it, the result here you can see, let me just make it a bigger. So h is hello and w is world. So it is like it doesn't have any space, so it might not be a little bit clear to you. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write here /n. Okay, /n basically it does nothing but it takes you to the next line. All right, so let me just run it again here, and here you can see that we have hello h, hello, and then we have w, and then we have hello world. All right, so these are the things that we have assigned to the h and w, and then we have printed them out using the getters. So I hope you've got the concept of encapsulation. That was a very simple example that we have done. So now let's move on to the next question, which is essentially polymorphism. So polymorphism is basically the ability of an object to take on many forms. Okay, so the most common use of polymorphism in object-oriented programming, it occurs when a parent class reference is used to refer to a child class object. Okay, so any Java object that can pass more than one, basically more than one is a relationship sort of category test. It is considered to be polymorphic. All right. So for example, I gave you an example like recently when we were talking about inheritance. I gave you an example of a dog, which was like an animal class. Okay. All right. So let's just say that let's discuss now lion or tiger maybe. So tiger is basically an animal, right? And it is a carnivore. So carnivores and herbivores, if you're familiar, that herbivores are the animals which basically eat grass, and the carnivores are the animals that eat animals. Okay. The idea is that it is important to know that the only possible way to access an object is through a reference variable. All right. So a reference variable can be only one type. Once declared, the type of a reference variable, it cannot be changed whatsoever. The reference variable, it can be reassigned as well to other objects, provided that is not declared final. Okay, so if you declare the object as final, it cannot be really changed. Okay, so a reference variable, it can refer to any object of its declared type or any subtype of its declared type. All right, so remember that it has to be of the same type. And a reference variable can be declared as a class or interface type as well. Okay, so I'm assuming that you're familiar with interfaces as well. So now let's say right now I'm not going to do a code example, rather I'm just going to give you a blueprint of the code. So just look at that and try to code for the polymorphism yourself. Okay, so I have done the code for encapsulation, I have done the code for inheritance. I leave this code onto you. I would just give you a blueprint. Okay, so let's say that here we have a class which is essentially a public class animal, let's say. Okay, and you know, we have this class here. This is the body, and inside of this we have like everything. All right, so the other class that we are gonna have here is, let's say, public class tiger, which would basically it would be extended from animal. All right, and let's say that we have an interface which is essentially let's say public interface and let's say carnivores. All right, so we have interface here, we have the class, and basically we try to implement this interface. And we basically try to implement this interface, which is essentially carnivores. All right, so the blueprint of that would be that a tiger or a lion is an animal, right? So it has an is-a relationship with the animal class. A tiger is a carnivore, so it has an is-a relationship with the carnivore as well. A tiger is also a tiger, right? So a tiger is inside the tiger class, so it has is-a relationship with the tiger class as well, and also we are going to use it as an object as well. Okay, so right here let me just write here tiger. All right, and let me create an object t, let's say, and then we have here new, and we have here tiger. All right, so this is an object here. Let me just write here dig maybe. So now you're going to put here a semicolon in Java always, right? So you have this one here, and now what you're going to do is that you're going to create the object of the animal class. Let's call it ANM, and that is going to be equal to, let's say, TIG. All right, so after that we have the carnivores interface, so we write here carnivores, and we call here CNV equals, and we also keep it equal to TIG, which is tiger essentially. And then after that we have an object obj, let's say object obj, and we keep it equals to tiger as well. Okay, so I hope you have got the point. So that is the basic blueprint of polymorphism, and that's how simple it is. And all the reference variables here, you can see they all refer to the same tiger object, which is tig, right? So the example is going to be fairly simple, in which you are going to have a constructor, and using that constructor you are basically going to give a certain specification to the tiger. Okay, so that's on you, so do that yourself. And now we move on to the next question, which is essentially, what are local and global variables? So the global variables, they are declared outside any function, and they can be accessed or used on any function in the program, right? And local variables, they are basically declared inside a function, and they can only be accessed inside the territory of that function. Okay, so if you go outside that function and that you have declared a variable inside the function, you cannot really access that. All right, while the global variable that you have declared outside the function and inside the class, you can access it anywhere inside it. All right, inside the program. So even if the name is the same, still you cannot access it. Okay, I'm gonna give you a small example. By watching that example, you would get an idea about local and global variables. All right, and let's say we have an integer variable here, int a equals, let's say 10, and here we have integer b equals, let's say 15. All right, so now what we're going to do is that we're going to have a function here. So let's say void func1, and inside of that function, what we're going to do is that we're going to have I think we need to have this function out from outside the class, right? Yeah, okay, sorry, not outside the class but outside the main function. Okay, so I was writing this function inside the main class, which makes no sense obviously, because main is a function itself and it won't allow you to write a function inside of it. Okay, so you can call the function inside the main function, but you cannot actually create one inside the main function. Okay, so you have to create the function outside the main function. So now what you do is that you declare an integer b here as, let's say, 45, and you print it out here. Okay, so you write here system dot out dot println, and you print it like b here, and you write here println. All right, so in the similar way, you are going to have the void function func1 or func2, and here you are going to have an integer b again, and let's say we call it 89, and again we basically print it system dot out dot println. Okay, and in here we're gonna print out b again, and now we are going to call this here. Okay, so we call it the function 1 here, and then we call it function 2 here. Let's create them static functions. Okay, static. All right, so now what we are going to do is that we are going to basically print out the a and b from here as well. So we basically write here system.out.println. Let me just copy this line from here, and we paste it right here, and this is a, let's say. Okay, so we basically go ahead, we try to run our program, and here you can see we have a, which is equals to 10, we have b, which is like basically it is equal to 15, and then we have 45, that is also b, which is being accessed locally, and we also have 89, which is b as well. Okay, So the idea is that A and B here, they are global variables and they can be accessed anywhere in the class, while this B here, it can only be accessed and changed inside this function variable or the function territory. Okay, so I hope you have got the point. So now let's move on to the next question, which is essentially, what is a class in Java? The idea is that all the Java codes, they are basically defined in a class. Okay, and a class could have variables and methods and all the code. So here we can see that we have public class hello, and whatever the code, whatever the main function and other functions or other methods, we will all write it inside this class. Okay, so that is basically a class. And if you talk about variables, they are just attributes which define the state of a class. And if you talk about methods or functions, they are just a place of where you basically write the code. And basically it is to avoid the redundancy in the code. So for example, if you have to have a function or a method here and you want to call it like more than once, you just write function. Okay, so you do not write that piece of code again and again. Rather, you just put that piece of code inside a function or inside a method, and then you just simply call it inside the main method. Okay, so now let's move on to the next question, which is essentially, what is an object in Java? All right, or as the object is concerned, that it is an instance of a class, and obviously the instance of a class is called object. Okay, so the object has different states and behaviors depending upon the class, depending upon what class you're taking the object of. Okay, so basically whenever the JVM is going to read the new method, it is going to assume or the new keyword, it is going to assume that it is time to create a new object of that specific class. So for example, let me just remove all of that from here, and let me just go to the next line here. All right, and in here, let's say we have this hello world class, right? And if I create an object here, whenever it would read this new, okay, it knows that now it has to create an object. Okay, so here you can say that in this specific line, the creation of object is happening. All right, so you can write here creation of object. So this is basically a comment here with double backslash. Okay, so that's it about the object. All right, so now let's move on to the next question, which is essentially the differences between array and array list. All right, let's go ahead and let's discuss it. So let me just write here array first. Let me just write here list array. Okay, or array list basically. So if we talk about array, so its size should be given at the time of array declaration. Okay, so you can say size required. All right, so if you talk about the array list, in that sort of situation, size may not be required. Okay, so you write here size not required. Okay, you can give the size and you can not give the size. It depends upon you. Basically it changes the size dynamically. Okay, so that is one major difference that I know of. The second one is that you basically when you're basically creating it, or when you're adding something to it, adding some value, in the case of the array, you need to specify the index. Okay, specify index while adding any element. All right, while in the case of array list, you do not need to specify index while adding any element. All right, so that is the second difference that I know of. And the third difference I think it is that here the array, it is not parameterized, while here in the array list it is parameterized. Okay, so these are the major differences between array and array list, and if you're asked in the interview about them, you can just simply tell these three differences, and that would be enough and sufficient. Okay, so now let's move on to the next question, which is like, what are collections in Java? The idea is that collection is a framework that is designed to store the objects and manipulate the design to store the objects basically. So the collections are used to perform a few of the operations that I'm going to enlist here. So they are used to perform search, they are used to perform sorting, and they are used to perform manipulation of the objects and the classes and the methods, and they are used to insert, and they're used to perform delete. All right, so a group of objects is known as collections. You can call them collections, and all the classes and then interfaces for collecting are available in the Java util package, right? So let me just write here available in Java util package. All right, so now let's move on to the next question, and that is, what is an exception in Java? All right, so the idea is that an exception is a problem that can occur during the normal flow of an execution. And a method can throw an exception when something fails at runtime. Okay, so if that exception couldn't be handled, then the execution gets terminated before even it completes the task, right? So if we have handled the exception, then the normal flow, it gets continued, and the exceptions are a subclass of I think for that you have to use the java.lang.exception class. All right, so these are like the extension of that class specific, the built-in class you can say. So if you are to catch an exception, the general syntax of that, let me just write here for you. So let me just remove this object here. So in exception, in the measure of exception, you have try catch block, right? So here you can see that it is giving an error because it is expecting a catch block here. So here you are going to have a catch block. Okay, so you write here catch, and then you write here exception, and you have the E here, the object of exception, and after that you're gonna have here brackets, and you can see that the error has been gone. So inside this try block, you write here the risky code which could cause an error or an exception. Okay, so risky code here, and here you basically catch the exception. So you'd write here exceptions are caught here. Okay, so basically this is the syntax of writing a catch block. So basically this is the syntax of basically catching an exception, and when you have doubt on any piece of code, just put that in the try block and catch the exception in the next block, whatever the exception you expect. Okay, so now let's move on to the last question. This is the last question but not the least, that what is a thread in Java? So the idea is that a thread in the context of Java, if you talk about, it is the path followed when executing a program. Okay, so you can write here path followed when executing a program. All right, so that is the one thing, and the other thing is that all the Java programs have at least one thread. Okay, that is compulsory. So that one thread, it is usually called as main thread, which is created by the JVM, and JVM stands for Java Virtual Machine. Okay. When the program starts or when the program begins, at that time that main thread is being created. Okay. So in Java, creating a thread, it is basically accomplished by implementing an interface, and basically it is accomplished by extending a class. Okay. So in Java, you can say that there is a problem for like multiple inheritance. You cannot do that. So in order to accomplish the goal of multiple inheritance, you basically use interface. Okay, so inside the interface, basically you have different sorts of methods and functions. Basically methods and function is like same. Okay, so methods or functions, you can say. So you have methods or functions inside the interface which have not yet been implemented. Okay, so you implement them using multiple inheritance. All right, so you can say that interface is basically an alternate to multiple inheritance. So every Java thread, it is basically created and it is controlled by a built-in class, which is essentially java.lang.thread. Okay, so you have to use this built-in class whenever you are basically using threads. Okay, and obviously Java is a multi-threaded application that basically allows multiple thread execution at any particular time as well. Okay, so if your application is the single threaded application, only one thread is executed at the time. And it is because the application or program, it can handle only one task at a time. So if your application is multi-threaded, you can actually handle multiple tasks simultaneously. All right. So that's it from this interview video. I hope you have enjoyed it. You have learned something new. I have tried to explain everything in detail, but if I have missed something, you can add that in the comments below. And if you think that there is any other very important and core question, you can also add that in the comments below. So that's it from this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. You have learned something new. For written articles, you can always visit our website linuxn.com, and I will see you in the next video.